All right, Chris, we had one thing we wanted to take a little bit of a closer look at as we hinted at it. Red Hat Summit was not the only big event last week because the other one was Dell Tech World. And it's in part because Dell is rolling out initiatives to address key areas of their technology offerings because a lot of those technologies are starting to move closer to the cloud. The first one that was talked about was Dell APEX storage for public cloud. It's a software-defined storage platform that works with AWS and Azure. It integrates their existing tool set to provide a hybrid multi-cloud experience. Also announced was Dell NativeEdge. It's a software platform that can help manage deployment of applications and devices to the edge of your enterprise. And in addition to that, as they are now doing, they announced a new project. That is Project Fort Zero. That is not a Fortinet product, by the way. It is their implementation of Zero Trust Network Architecture. The last big announcement, as I alluded to in a previous story, was that Nvidia is looking to partner with them on Project Helix. What is Helix? Helix is a Dell server, PowerEdge server running H100 GPUs. You know, those big, hungry, massive AI drivers that are, you know, the industry is all crazy about. And Nvidia, at their big announcement this week, rode that to being a $1 trillion company. So, you know, there's a lot of excitement about that. But Chris, I want to come back to kind of the Dell aspect of things. Compared to something like Red Hat Summit, where, you know, they were very focused on Ansible, they were very focused on AI and stuff like that. Dell seems to basically kind of be spreading the love everywhere. It's like, oh, we're going to do some cloud stuff, we're going to do some edge stuff, and we're going to be involved in the AI. And I mean, they even announced they're doing a private wireless deployment. I guess that kind of competes with some of the stuff that Aruba's doing. What does this ultimately mean for Dell?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, I think. And I mean, to be fair, right? I mean, Red Hat in general is a more focused, a kind of a smaller scope of what they're looking at in general. And then Dell has kind of grown some arms and legs over the years. It's definitely a far cry from, ordering parts out of a catalog to get put together for you as a, the PC builder they kind of started out as, however many long years ago. And a lot of this, I think, is, to me anyway, looks like, a very strong physical infrastructure, hardware provider coming to terms with a much more cloud-based reality. And how do you do that, right? And I think some of the way you do that is you try things out. And not to say that these are all experiments. I think a lot of this is really solid groundwork that's going to, pay dividends going forward. But some of it's probably just, putting those branches out a little bit and figuring out where where things match. Also, it's just the fact that Dell has kind of sprawled and grown quite a bit. And, just the definition of what infrastructure has changed over the years, right? And so there's definitely folks who are coming up in industry now who, when they think of infrastructure, they think of a VPC or of, clicking buttons on a GCP or an Azure or a AWS dashboard and making things happen behind the scenes and not really understanding, kind of the nicks and cuts and scratches that we may have had as older folks, racking servers and plugging these things in. And so, this is Dell, I think, finding its way in a pretty different world than it grew up in. This stuff's pretty neat. I think, there's some really cool announcements tied in here. I do think that, even though it may sound a little scattered, there are some really neat stuff here going on, and they're kind of staying on top of what's going on, right? I think this view towards multi-cloud, which, people can be for it or against it, but really, I think if you're not building your own cloud, then multi-cloud is definitely the way to go from a vendor perspective, right? Let's tie these things together. Let's make sure that we are cross compatible across all of them. That seems like the right focus. And building these tools over the top of the public cloud. It's interesting, right? And I don't want to go too far away from Dell, but to me, this multi-cloud stuff, which we're seeing more of in this Dell announcement, is really interesting as how this will shake out. At one time, the internet service providers had a really powerful position, and you had to be on their network to get different services and to get different connectivity. And over time, they kind of got commoditized, and they've bemoaned the idea of over the top for a long, long time. And this multi-cloud stuff is to me looks a lot like over the top, right? Let's build these virtual storage systems that ride over the top of multiple clouds, and they kind of squish down the value prop of the cloud providers a little bit, maybe. And of course, if I'm Dell, that's what I want to do. I want to make sure that I'm at the locus of the value creation. I do think, just to touch on one more thing before I hand it back over to you, Tom, the Project Fort Zero looks great to me. And again, this is one of those things where they're building it into all of their other apps and products. Now, this maybe will take some time to get there, and the capability isn't even released yet. It's going to be released sometime in the next year. They say it will be validated by the U.S. Department of Defense. But building zero trust network access, least privilege access into kind of all of your apps and products is a great move. I wish more folks would do it. And I think, tying that all together, right, this kind of looks like Dell has a fairly coherent vision of where they're going in this kind of new, maybe scattered infrastructure world.
And I think that it's an important distinction that we draw here, that this is not a grand strategy by Dell that has a flowery name and launch promo, whatever. This is Dell looking at where the pain points are in the journey and tweaking the knobs a little bit, if you will. Like, are you going to be able to outcompute AWS? Probably not. But if their storage solution is non-optimal, or you have data that needs to move back and forth, AWS doesn't care. Just deploy an outpost and run our stuff on your site. Dell understands that that's a problem and it needs to be addressed. And so I applaud them for that. Like, edge connectivity is a hot new thing. I mean, we have an edge field day now for that very reason, but it's not an easy solution. I mean, zero trust network architecture is just the evolution of stuff we've been trying to get deployed for years. Whether you call it NAC or, least trust or whatever, we're slowly getting there, and Dell understands that. And I think to me, it's kind of telling that Dell is like, well, hey, we can jump into the party here and offer that, considering, kind of where the solutions that Dell offers for networking are on the mix. I mean, I was literally thinking about that the other day because someone said Dell networking, and I was like, huh, really? So I think that that's great. Obviously, the AI stuff is the AI stuff, and I that's going to happen. But the fact that Dell is recognizing that there's more to this than just building big workhorses to run AI workloads, what develops around that? And I think that is ultimately going to be an important challenge. And if you look at the way that they're offering these things, discrete projects that get built into products a year later, VMware is doing the same thing with a lot of their project stuff. I wonder why. I think that DNA is kind of shared between the two organizations, which may ultimately end up being a good thing. But when you look at what Dell is really trying to do, they're trying to provide an integrated solution that they can go to as a partner and say, we can get you online from wherever you are. We can ease your journey to the cloud or keep you in a foot in both worlds if that's what you need to do. And, we also can partner to the bigger corporations out there to kind of run their workloads as they need them. And I think that ultimately that's Dell's survival right now, is offering a bridge between those two organizations from an infrastructure perspective. Because let's be fair, we are in 2023. The organizations that were all out for cloud are there. The ones that are still struggling with that transition are just not sure. They don't need a partner that's going to walk in with an army of consultants and be like, all right, we're cutting these cords and we're moving everything into AWS, and that's that. They need someone who can go, well, yeah, it makes sense for you to do that here, but if this is an issue, you need to keep it over here, but here's a platform to manage both of those. They're going to do a lot better job than, let's just throw it out there, someone like an HPE GreenLake. Because when you look at what these announcements are, a lot of these are positioned to kind of compete with HPE. They're offering cloud services a la GreenLake. They're offering edge connectivity a la HP Aruba networking. I mean, right down to the fact they're offering a private wireless solution that they're partnering with another company on. If you'd have told me 6 months ago that Dell would be offering a private wireless, private LTE solution, I would have checked my coffee to make sure that I wasn't drinking ketamine in it, because that's the kind of hallucination that someone comes up with out of nowhere. And yet here we are now. Dell has a private wireless solution. So if you deploy it, you can get, your warehouse online or something like that. I like the moves. What I don't know is how they're going to pay off ultimately. I want to track what happened at Dell Tech World against future conferences, specifically HPE Discover, to see how the messaging differs. Is it, going to sound the same with, search and replace terms? Is HPE going to come up with a different strategy, like a unified front for how to do this versus Dell's kind of point solutions? I don't know. And I don't know which one the market's going to respond to. Maybe the market's like, hey, I've solved all my other problems, but I need this APEX software storage thing. I'll just go with that, and the rest of it we can pick up later. time will tell. And that's the thing, is Dell is one of the companies that has enough time to kind of try this out. Smaller providers, smaller organizations really don't. And one would hope that this is enough to kind of keep Dell relevant in the conversation, which ironically enough, it's Dell. Like, how could you have imagined that this was a conversation that we would be having anytime? And yet here we are with most people talking about cloud this, cloud that, build my own, roll this, do that. And then you got Dell and HP and a bunch of other companies kind of sitting over on the side going, we want to play too. We have experience in this. I hope it all works out for them.